We got the gang back. Everyone's in town. I feel like
nobody's at the doctor.
No one's at the doctor. No one's
Although,
serving.
we do after this weekend, we probably should be.
We have a holy cow on a big weekend.
Yeah, we got a lot of news to cover today. Lots of global conflict. I was gonna shoot this tweet, and I didn't. It's still in my drafts because I just don't feel like putting up with the mentions. But if you look at everything that's happening in the world right now, all the global conflict, I mean, this all started, it's poor leadership, weak leadership, but a lot of it's bad energy policy as well. I mean, that's what enabled Russia to go attack Ukraine. And now you've got instability in, with Armenia, which you covered a couple weeks ago. And now obviously what's happening between Palestine and Israel. And so, I always hate to like distill it down. Like, what does this mean for oil markets? But the fact is that you see things happening with, Mark's the one to talk on this, but oil is a global market, and these conflicts tend to have pretty big consequences in the market. So, guess we can start there. Talking about what all
first
of this means.
Our hearts go out to. When there's big conflicts and you might even know people, it's like our hearts go out to.
It's just senseless too, right? I've got a friend on Twitter, and his wife and all his family are back in Israel, and he's a startup founder, and he's like, I'm over here in the States, and he feels helpless. And, I'm sure there's,
we got a lot of friends and family.
There's good and bad. There's good and bad people on both sides.
I text a lot of my friends in Israel saying, hey, I hope you're okay.
Yeah.
Praying for you.
It's crazy. Me and Jake recorded a podcast back in 2020 with Soshi, I think is her name. And anyways, sorry if I got her name wrong, but she's an immigrant from Israel. It was like telling us about like growing up in Israel. And after that podcast, I was just like, it's crazy. Like, we live a life. Like, I don't have to worry about missiles hitting my house and destroying my neighborhood, and having to go fight for your country. And they're over there trying to build startups, and you have to, same thing with Ukraine. You have a lot of founders in Ukraine, and it's like you got war going on outside, and you're just trying to, live life and build things. And so very thankful for, the position that we're in, but yeah, it's hard to imagine what that's like.
Yeah. It was, it was certainly a milestone date when all this started. This was the 50th anniversary of the start of the 73 Yom Kippur War.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those kind of surreal news weekends where things are rolling out and you hear about hang gliders and motorcycles and concerts and just all kinds of mayhem going on the front end of this, and, trying to make sense of it all. But, at the end of the day, it is just tragic for those who are kind of innocently in the middle of it. And the numbers coming out that I've seen with the updates are just pretty horrific. And
many of us that are younger, we haven't lived in seeing war like maybe some of our ancestors did in a way that like it affected everybody. Now it's sort of isolated in regions where it doesn't really, one of my actual suite mates from college was called into the first Gulf War. But what's interesting is my grandfather wanted to go serve in World War II, and he was pissed because he was sent to West Texas to keep the oil pumping. And I'm
Which is why we won.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
West
thing.
Texas
it's like I'm a
West
big
Texas
like Band
and
of
East
Brothers
Texas.
guy. Like I love seeing like we won a battle and it's all about the guys that fought. Thank God for those guys. But as I sat down, my grandfather used to tell me these stories. Is like, if they didn't get the gasoline, the diesel to the tanks at the right time, we would have gotten killed.
Yeah. Rommel's tanks just ran out of
gas,
fuel
ran out of fuel.
Libya and kind of northern Africa.
So it really does come down to you need a great supply chain of energy to keep going.
Well, it's actually, tie in a couple things here. Like my great uncle was on the 101st Airborne and jumped in Normandy, and so I have that. But then my great grandfather, he owned a grocery store in Midland, built a motel in the back for the Army generals that were coming in they had like Midland not only was it important for oil and gas, but they started building these bombing training centers there for the Army pilots. And Chuck and I have talked about this a lot. Like East Texas, West Texas oil is what won World War II for Americans. So these things can't really be talked about kind of siloed because they are so intertwined, right? And this kind of goes back to why I always talk about a diverse and secure energy mix, because the countries that have access to cheap and affordable energy, like the Chinas of the world, like if China continues to build out coal plants and they're going to take whatever energy source that they can, that doesn't bode well for the United States and its enemies over time, right?
We ended last week's episode quoting The Art of War and how China is actually listening to their own narrative about like the cheapest energy wins. And I don't remember the quote I quoted, but Chuck knew it. So, and if Chuck knows it, it must be a good one.
Matters.
Well, to fast forward to today with the horrific things going on in Israel, I saw this tweet, so I have not independently verified the numbers, but they sound right. So the Yom Kippur War of 1973, over the next 7 years, so 73 to 80, crude prices went from $5 a barrel to $50 a barrel. That sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates went from 6.5% to 18%. That sounded right. Gold went from $42 an ounce to $875 an ounce. Stocks lost almost 50% of their value in the year after the Yom Kippur War, so to 1974. And at year 7 that we've been talking about for the other stats, stock market was about break even. So, I think if we're kind of talking through what might happen, I'm not saying that's the base case, but that's at least something that's on the table. Because, reports are coming out from reputable news sources like Wall Street Journal that Iran participated in the planning, execution of the Hamas attack on Israel, and that's a regional conflict really quickly before we notice it, possibly.
Also, Biden sent $6 billion over to Iran shortly before that, right?
It was at least negotiated for humanitarian relief, and
most of the first reaction analysis or commentary as it relates to energy has been, well, we could see some disruption or restriction of supply from Iran in terms of reimposing tighter sanctions. I think, to the point of if this thing in terms of Iran's involvement then motivates a more aggressive response by Israel, do you start talking about more fundamental damage to things like the Iranian production base? Because if we remember back in 2019, the drone strike on Abqaiq and
on my birthday.
On your birthday.
On my birthday. I was laying by a pool.
I didn't know it was your birthday then, but I remember that day.
Now we do now. But no, I was actually laying by a pool in Las Vegas wanting a birthday present, and you're like, holy cow, $100 oil, here it comes. But
yeah, that risk premium, I was reading something earlier this morning, that risk premium lasted about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so
it was nothing. It was
we used to say
up.
that at least in the last 10 years, maybe the last 15 years on the investment side, is that, geopolitical risk premium ain't what it used to be.
So when we were fundraising, because we had just gotten done fundraising Energy Fund 8, we closed that in 2018. So it was within a year of this. One of the pages in the pitch book is actually the percent of worldwide oil production that was offline because of political conflicts. And one of the things that's happened is, since the early 70s, when it was at a ridiculous amount of oil that was offline because of politics and war and conflict, et cetera, the last 10 years, it had been next to nothing. And part of the point we made fundraising was, hey, we're on borrowed time here. Something bad's going to happen, and vis-a-vis oil barrels will come offline because of this. And then, Mark, you and I were talking this morning. Well, we did have that happen with Russia. We imposed sanction on it, and none of the barrels came offline. They just traded at different prices.
Yeah, they are being traded.
They went to India and got refined into products that made their way to places like Saudi and then over to the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So
there's much more flexibility and an ability to pivot within the global producing and refining complex.
Well, let me ask you a question. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, the U.S. supported Israel, and the what was known as OPEC back then, OAPEC, they had an embargo on the U.S. and Western nations for oil. So, and it lasted till March of 1974.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a pretty big impact on oil reserves, at least to someone like the United States. Are we going to see that again? Because we're talking about how when there is a big conflict, it kind of really doesn't matter, really, in terms of oil supplies, not oil price per se.
Yeah.
Are we foreseeing that in the future that could happen?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it now, I mean, what it sounds like from my perspective, also, I wasn't alive back then during these conflicts, so I don't know how things were then, but it sounds like the market. Am I throwing shade at you guys? Yeah. Hell yeah, I am.
I was 5. It's not like I had my calculator out and was crunching numbers.
I just saw Mark over here smirking, so I had to address it.
Yeah, me too.
I do vaguely remember gas lines, but I wasn't driving then.
I mean, it's fair to assume that the market is more fungible now, right? And more connected on a global basis. And so, like when the Russian-Ukraine conflict started, I know Chuck and I had recorded a lot of content talking about that. The barrels just get traded in other parts of the world, and it just kind of gets mixed into the bunch. But I think what's interesting, the question, like you asked about the embargo, but how does the SPR play into this? Because there's been a lot of talk about
your tweets on the SPR, by the way.
You love my tweets?
Is it your tweets or somebody? It's one of our groups. It's one of our groups that's like tweeting some great stuff on SPR.
Oh.
Like these people don't even know how to calculate the SPR.
Oh no, that wasn't me. I saw what you're talking about. I think Rory had posted something. Rory Johnson posted something on it. Yeah.
All you young people look alike.
Young people look alike.
On Twitter.
But, I think that the SPR has been used over the last year in a way that it wasn't necessarily intended to be used. But now that when you think about it, it's like, oh, well, we are an energy exporter. So does the SPR need to be used in the way that it's been used in a historical context? And so there's just so many like changing dynamics that, you look at these things from the 70s and it's like, is it really a good historical marker for us to look back on and be like, oh, this is what we can expect? Because so much has changed over the last 50 years.
To answer Kirk's question, or maybe to handicap it, what's the probability we see a 73 to 74 type of disruption and the the pain that it inflicted in the U.S.? I think that scenario is a very low kind of single digit probability. It would require some things out on the tail in terms of how this thing spins out and
a bombe de guerre. I mean, that's really, right. I think the kind of, I hate to kind of be flippant about it, but that's the fundamental, to your point you made earlier, is a fundamental destruction of the oil producing assets.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into the territory of Middle Eastern politics, but if you think about, some of the things that have been embedded in these stories, the U.S. is clearly behind trying to broker the normalization between Saudi and Israel. That's the thing that's been front and center politically. Well, now I saw one commentator say, what if there were concessions on the table with respect to Palestine that Israel is no longer going to make because of what has happened over this past weekend? Is that an element that causes the forward momentum on this normalizing to kind of unravel? Saudi certainly has a lot of power here either way, to use their spare capacity margin and their power within OPEC to do the things that they want to do to respond politically, for sure, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all.
I appreciate that Mark said I don't want to dive too deep into Middle Eastern politics. I was gonna send a screenshot on Twitter. It was like some of my friends like Bomber and Fraxon and Viper all talking about the intricacies of Middle Eastern politics, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that no one understands it better than some land bros out in West Texas.
I mean, I will say, it's funny because you think about the United States became really a superpower over oil and gas, and part of that was because the Saudis were looking at in the early 1900s just like this risk of, you've got the Germans, you got the French, you got the British all wanting contracts in the kingdom. Let's give a contract over to this small little company over in the United States, which happened to be Standard Oil, came Exxon.
Mm-hmm.
It really put us on a global scale. If you talk to the energy guys, they're going to say like, man, America was just sort of the sleepy nation until we got thrown into the war. But really, we were given contracts over in Saudi that sort of created super company, super capability. It's interesting. So a lot of our sort of greatness comes from perhaps that region. So
yeah,
we should talk more.
Which has always been something that's like used to attack oil and gas, right? Like it's always fighting wars over,
Blood for
oil and
oil.
gas. Yeah. Which isn't necessarily like, it's not true today, right? But it wasn't that long ago that, you did have crossover between oil and political skirmishes and things of this nature. Kirk, you made a comment earlier about like the supply chain and logistics. I got that picture hanging up of Alexander the Great in the office, and most people, like when they study Alexander the Great, it's all about like the battles and the wars, but like what I just can't wrap my head around, and what's so interesting to me about the Greeks was like the supply chain and logistics to mobilize men across a continent and keep them fed and
amazing,
and just equipped. And it's like, how do you do that even in modern today war? Like
we couldn't buy toilet paper during a pandemic. So I mean,
no doubt.
Yeah,
it's so good.
I still haven't figured that link out.
Yeah,
that's actually like that's gonna be one of the, I can't wait until like the history books like 300 years from now. Like I hope they have a footnote of that and like, yeah, all the toilet paper is gone, and people are just like, why the fuck was all the toilet paper gone? It's like, no one knows. No one knew then. No one knows
getting
now.
some toilet paper
among the list of symptoms.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm sure this will be kind of developing macro. It's kind of uneasy to think about. I mean, you just think about all the conflict that's happening, Russia, Ukraine, with Armenians, with Israel, Palestine. Like, it seems like it has the potential to break out into something larger, right? Into a world war. So it seems like it's a very fine line.
I think to put a bow on commodity and energy equities markets, the early consensus is that this is going to be contained, and the risk premium effect is going to be fairly short-lived. And Wall Street's been wrong before, but that was my general synthesis from skimming headlines over the weekend.
That's what you're picking up.
So as we're looking at this, we've got U.S.-based large oil and gas companies looking to pick off some smaller players in the Permian. Does this have anything to do with this? Let's dive into like this.
So we had another rumor that Exxon is acquiring Pioneer Natural Resources for $60 billion. And I don't know if y'all saw my meme on Twitter or not, but I'll have Jacob throw it up on the screen if you didn't get to see it. But a lot of people on EFT are like, kind of it's like a wet dream for them. They're like, oh, Pioneer's getting acquired. And there were already rumors, what was it, like 6 months ago, that Pioneer was getting acquired by Exxon.
Every 6 months.
I'm sure it's been on the shelf and it keeps coming back.
It's coming back again. I hope it just happens so that we can be done talking about it. But today's Monday. Still haven't seen anything official on it. I figure if there's actually something happening, you would see something official on it. But
there was only one thing that came out of Exxon this weekend, and it wasn't this acquisition.
Well, there's some related news.
Well,
I'm saving this. I'm serving this up for Kirk. You can get
he's actually his neighbor, so you said, "Oh my god!" And we had to clarify whether he's a neighbor at the motel or actually in the same neighborhood where his family lives, and he
as we used to say, easy killer.
Yeah.
What I was linking back to was, did the events globally perhaps put a different timeline on an announcement, if there is an announcement forthcoming?
Thank you, Mark, for bringing this.
There was a
back
lot
to
of
reality.
distraction with the events going on in the Middle East and in the markets that, maybe, well, as I think Dan tweeted out on Thursday or Friday, talking about the rumor, I think he said 25% probability gets announced Friday, which didn't happen. 50% today, or today, Monday, where shows drops on Tuesday morning, and then the other 25% it gets pushed or doesn't happen. So,
do you think the news in Israel is enough to kill a deal? Can that be a potential factor?
I've had a similar situation where we were close on something and a big adjustment happened to product prices, and I'm not going to say what that was because that will give away the deal. But it was like, hey, let's just watch this for a week. And everybody kind of agreed, hey, let's just watch this for a week. No one has to go pencils down on tweaking nuances to the PSA and all, but let's make sure we're not in a brave new world before we
had
sign.
a similar moment in the middle of a pipe road show for a deal. I won't mention, but specifics around, where we literally borrowed a client's conference room to discuss, were we going to delay a week or two? And it was totally macroeconomic related, but it made everybody instantly queasy. So
that's a good
I've
point.
seen
I didn't think about
other deals where, there's this big implied premium based on crude leverage for a deal where literally seemingly in a week you're down 15%, headed much, much lower.
Yeah.
And you start talking about kind of what ifs around maybe adjusting or delaying or canceling related to that. But
Yeah.
typically, from what I've seen, it doesn't happen. It proceeds. But
because you're locked in and people have done so much work, you almost get into like, I have to get this deal done. Now, I'm not a big believer in coincidences. I'm not. I believe a lot of things happen and we don't have the information. But I will say over the weekend, the vice president of Exxon's upstream unconventional business, who oversees all the unconventional assets in the Permian, which Pioneer overlaps and is a great deal, he was arrested over the weekend
For sexual assault.
for sexual assault.
I didn't see the whole story.
Now, we don't know whether he's guilty or not, but that is either horrible timing or, who knows? And I'm not saying who knows. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm saying I don't believe in coincidences. This is a really bad timing. Maybe he's been doing this and someone wanted to blow the whistle. But what it does do is it does give cover for ExxonMobil to at least pause the jets and say, wait, there's a war. This guy, which maybe
So what's your conspiracy theory around this one here?
I don't have a conspiracy theory. I'm just saying there aren't a whole lot of coincidences in a business where everything's fair in love and war. I mean, maybe this guy, people knew was happening, or maybe not. Maybe it's just bad timing.
Yeah.
And I'm chalking this up to bad timing because I don't have any good information. But I'm saying
that
broke over the weekend, which I'm saying probably
I'm
would
asking
be a
what
good,
would be the reason for the coincidence.
The ridiculous stuff would be somehow there was spying going on, in effect, beautiful woman, nefarious agent spying to find out about the deal. That would be a ridiculous tinfoil hat conspiracy on it. Another one would be out celebrating, that led to mishap and stuff. There's stuff like that.
There's a lot of money trading hands, and whenever there's a lot of money trading hands,
but
there can be funny business.
But I do come back to this: if Exxon and Pioneer are doing a deal and it's a share for share deal, then it doesn't really matter what oil prices do. But there would be a lot of sensitivities around, in the middle of a horrific war, why will we announce a deal? So I could see a pause there. If it is cash consideration, then I could see both sides sitting there saying, "Hey, we just need to watch this."
Yeah, and they are every day responsible for running a company with global operations, and so when you have a conflict with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of potential to really mushroom, what does that collaterally do to your operations and the safety and security of your employees globally? That's something that leadership needs to be kind of clear-minded and uncluttered. This can wait for a few days. Right. I'm not saying that was the case, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
I get ExxonMobil's purpose here, but let's play Pioneer for a second. Oil prices today are what?
85-ish.
80. Yeah,
they're pretty high.
Mid-80s.
If you're Pioneer and you're selling, do you want cash or stock?
Cash.
You want cash, especially if they're going to pay. If ExxonMobil's paying a premium, you want cash. I always want cash because I'm not at risk of anything ExxonMobil does. That could be on the table, but I would definitely be pausing if there's a major, because I agree. I would pause if I'm ExxonMobil. If I'm a Pioneer, I'm saying the cash element just went higher.
No, I want to get.
Well, it comes down to the tax estate planning considerations of certain large holders and Pioneer.
The
Chuck may know of.
And this thing has been showing up here and there for the last how many years?
It continues.
What's a few more days?
That's what I'm saying is like, just make it happen if it's going to happen. This has been like a just wet dream for everyone in oil and gas finance for this, because there's also this whole sentiment that Pioneer's the domino and that there's going to be all this consolidation that flows in behind it. And I don't necessarily agree
Pioneer, Endeavor, Diamondback. Tick on down the list.
There's articles in multiple
Chevron. I mean, you can lay all the acreage.
Many of the sort of news sources I'm reading, it's like rivals Chevron and ConocoPhillips are also scouring the shale patch because they're all looking.
There's no scouring. I mean, you have your draft board. It's just who's going to fall.
We done scoured.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is like we've already seen M&A over the last several years. Like there's been a wave of M&A, not of your larger independents, but a lot of your mid-size. And then on top of that, there's always been this not always, but over the last few years is like, oh, there doesn't need to be 300 operators. There needs to be 5 out in the Permian. That'll just never happen. You'll never have just 5 operators out in the Permian. I mean,
wildcatters are wildcatters. They're always going to.
I was telling Chuck this weekend, I was talking to him on the phone. I got a book sitting in my living room called Wildcatters. And in part of that book, it talks about how independent oil and gas companies are one of the most resilient businesses that have ever existed in American history. Like independents just do not go away. Like they are always there. And so this whole, I think it's pie in the sky of like, oh, there only needs to be 5 operators and the majors are going to come in and roll everyone up. Like you're telling me like the Double Eagle guys won't go out and, do something, or that, the Sheffields of the world won't go up and spin something else up. Like it just doesn't.
I mean, at the end of the day, we saw with cell phone, there are 5 networks or whatever there are in America. I think the better analogy is actually the money management firms. When you look out of the money man, you have Carlyle, KKR. What do you got? 5 to 7 really big ones, and then you have small specialized shops everywhere. I mean, the middle-sized firms are getting squeezed in money management, and in effect will go away. But you're going to wind up with big guys, small guys. And the same will be true with oil and gas.
Chuck, going back to scouring for a second, who is from one of the bigs calling one of the littles? Who's calling who? And they're not scouring. They're saying, what's your price today?
You know what my sense is? And I have no inside information on this. I mean, my guys that I backed at Kane were 5 guys in a rusty pickup truck. So I was never invited to the big powwows or anything. But my sense is
you were too dangerous.
All the big guys, they're all talking to each other every day. The head of M&A over here is talking to the head of M&A over there. They're comparing notes on deals. It is an oligopoly, and it will probably the dominoes fall based on more kind of life events, personal type things. This person wants to reach higher. This person wants to do whatever. Estate planning here or there. I mean, I think that's what's going to drive a lot.
One tangent, and it involves your former employer and its European brethren. Will be interesting to see if this is a big strategic moment, this next wave or several waves of mega consolidation for the likes of Exxon and Chevron, with Weil's rethinking of portfolio allocation, portfolio construction. Will the Europeans look to restart, I guess, their aspirations and playing the shale game, or is it too late? How do you think about that?
Well, I think one of the things that if you ever read, BP and Shell both write these great scenario plannings and what's happening in the future. But if you read one of the scenarios that I found quite curious is the balkanization, where like there's going to be a pandemic, there's going to be wars, and people start looking more local because they don't trust what's over there. And that is, when you have viruses and you have pandemics, and you have all these things, it's like people are like, wait a minute, secure borders. It looks like right now, you're not hearing a lot from the BPs and the Shells. You're hearing ConocoPhillips, Chevron, ExxonMobil. These are local firms looking to acquire local dirt. I'm not sure Chevron or BP and Shell have the desire. I know internally when I was at Shell, it's harder when it's not local, and we're starting to move almost away from one world order back to, hey, let's go back to our corner. Let's find the most valuable dirt here. We can create a great business. That's what it looks like from my perspective. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but I don't see them as aggressive.
Completely hypothetical, and
yeah.
But we've talked a lot about Weil's using Shell as an example, striving to close the valuation gap.
Yeah.
And that valuation gap is directly related to the U.S.-based peers, right? So
Absolutely.
If they're doing this and attracting incrementally more equity capital, which is what he's after, multiple expansion, is there a rethinking of let's start playing offense again as it relates to unconventional? Maybe it doesn't have to be in the U.S.
We have
but
a new leader coming in at BP. Maybe want to put his stamp on things, her stamp on things.
I would say with those two, especially Shell, especially, they crush deep water. They're great offshore. I'm not saying like they didn't do great in the unconventional business. They lost their ass compared to others. I'm not sure it's for them. Now,
it's just hard to think.
Pretty resilient.
Pretty amazing team at Pioneer if we got a hold of it.
Oh yeah, maybe they could strike a bigger check. Yeah.
Does it turn into a bit of an auction? Because there's
you heard it here first.
Fewer and fewer.
Dude,
we breaking the news on this?
What? Wait, is
total disclaimer?
The merger proxy on how this deal came about will be a fascinating read. It will.
Yeah.
And they're going to be pointing to this. Wait, what time is it in our episode? They're going to go to 30-minute
mark.
They broke
BDE.
the news.
Okay. This is one of the proudest moments of my life because I thought it was so cool. There were discussions going on between a public company and a private company that shall remain nameless. And I had to make a phone call to somebody, and I got their voicemail, knowing that call would wind up in the merger proxy of some sort. I sang a complete rendition of Talk Dirty to Me by Poison and hung up just to see if the lawyers would put that into the merger proxy.
Incredible. And did they?
The deal wound up not happening, so we don't know, but I was quite proud of myself.
That's pretty funny.
Hey, while we're on this juncture, I've been thinking about West Texas, and I have a heart for it. I've read some of your tweets on it. I want to talk a little bit about JSX for a second.
Yeah, some big...
Because I'm kind of pissed right now.
I'm kind of pissed too. Well, so this is what happens.
Because Exxon's got to fly out to West Texas to look at their new territory.
Actually, you know what's funny is...
and they're not sending everyone on private jet.
I was flying home from Midland, and I was sitting next to head of corporate affairs for a large independent out in Midland, and he was telling me that, when he worked for Oxy, he's like, Oxy had a 737 or 747, but it would fly between Midland Odessa or Midland, DFW, and Houston. And he's like, that flight would be full every single day. And anyways, he's telling me that they got rid of it. But I was telling him about JSX because he never heard of JSX before. And I was like, yeah, JSX just announced that they have a flight going out to West Texas. Now, we were all excited because we thought it was going to be Midland Airport, but they made it Odessa, some airport in Odessa. I didn't even know Odessa had an airport, to be honest. So I was like, I was like, that sucks, but it's better than nothing.
They don't. They're just gonna. We're gonna put down on the dirt there.
Yeah, we're gonna land on a lease road. But anyways, the what's funny is on that conversation with this guy, I was telling him, I'm like, I was like, to be honest, I don't know how JSX is legal. Like, I don't know how they're getting through regulatory because, at JSX, they have these little, I don't know what jet it is, but it's comparable to United's regional jets.
Mm-hmm.
But instead
Embraer
of having, 2 seats on each side and it's like packed like a sardine can, it's more like it's 1 seat on each side. Like it's nice seats. I got like big, like tabletops, like cup holders, and you can show up 20 minutes before your flight. There's no security. They swipe your bags and you walk through a metal detector.
They serving 40s on that flight, or
It's Von Lane with wings.
Yeah.
That's what it is. They have my favorite part.
It's
You don't even know what a
basically
40
Uber
is,
for chartering a plane, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the 4 of us got together, chartered a flight, we don't walk through security. We just go to the
Right.
FBO, unless the charter operator wants us to do it. What all these guys are doing is basically Ubering, where 50 people can go do it.
Yeah.
Well, the major airlines are fighting JSX.
Well, here's I didn't even get to my favorite part.
Oh,
they have Starlink on
Gosh,
the planes
Chuck.
now. So you can be there on the plane, like actually streaming content.
Dude.
And I'm like, what's taking Southwest and United so long to do that? And so anyways, the CEO of, sorry, I just threw water all over you. The CEO of JSX, he sent out this email. It's like, hey, we're being attacked by Southwest and United and the other major air carriers. They've been lobbying and are attacking JSX and trying to get us shut down under regulatory pressure. And so anyways, I went and signed the petition. I never do that shit, but I love JSX. So I went and signed the petition and gave my testimony of how much I love them. I love the experience and feel safe on the planes.
I took it one time from LA to Napa.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. You just threw that one out. I just took it from LA to Napa.
I could name drop who I was with too, but I'm not going to do that. But anyway,
There's enough of that on this show.
We can only imagine.
Yeah.
Look, first off, Chuck wasn't taking his private jet. He was flying commercial here, so fucking cut him some slack. He's not actually flexing here.
Exactly. My jet was in the shop at the time, and nobody at Kane Anderson would allow me to use their jet. And I'm not bitter about that still. I'm more bitter about that than getting fired. But it was freaky to me that you don't have to walk through a metal detector. Because
Well, you do now.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you have to walk.
We didn't have to walk through a metal detector.
Yeah, back then you didn't, but now you have to walk through a metal detector and they swipe your bag for explosives.
Okay.
Also.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of security now, but
Yeah.
it is. But that was like my point is like, it's like if there was a terrorist that wanted, like they could do damage with one of these planes if they wanted to. So, not saying that. I was going to actually send out this tweet the other day, but I'm fully convinced that the TSA is just a jobs program. That doesn't actually like serve any purpose. Like I don't necessarily feel any safer at airports with TSA, but yeah. So I'm pretty pissed about the JSX thing. Here's what pisses me off. It's I actually kind of understand the Southwest and the United take. Southwest I don't, because it seems like they forgot their history and who they were as an airline, which is
they forgot the roots.
But what I hate about it is that JSX has actually just spent a lot of time into how can we make a better flying experience? And hey, we'll charge a little bit of a premium, but guess what? There actually is a market for people that will pay a little bit to have a better flying experience. Like the flying experience on major airlines is just
shitty.
It's comical how bad it is.
The one defense I will say of the bigger guys is it's
Chuck sponsored by First Class at United.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking.
Exactly. No, but it's just, hey, we got to play by all these rules. These guys don't. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Oil and gas business in the United States saying, hey, we've got all this worker safety, these emission standards that Venezuela doesn't have. Hey.
Oh, I thought you were going to say oil and gas, like bitching about renewables, not playing on the same playing field.
Well,
It's the same thing.
Them too.
Yeah.
But we're about to have Fuse, so I didn't
Yeah.
want to like throw that out here.
Yeah.
Just trying to be friendly. Yeah. So,
no, so I
but
actually,
JSX, I love the
no,
experience.
I
It's
understand
great.
it. I understand it from that perspective, but I don't know. I like to see JSX, like maybe they can get around it by, hey, we charge a member, like you have to pay a membership.
Yeah.
I'd pay,
Fractional ownership of the plane when you buy a ticket.
Yeah, something, something to that degree. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But speaking of planes and conspiracy theories from earlier, have y'all seen this conspiracy theory going around about Taylor Swift and
Tay-Tay.
her jet? Have y'all seen this?
No.
So
Oh, this is
is
great.
all like,
Is Travis coming in? Are we
I-
no,
I-
no
football
trouble.
for a second?
No.
Yeah,
So,
Travis is
Travis plays a little-
tangentially involved. Keep
yeah,
going.
a little bit of a part of it. So several weeks ago, if you search Taylor Swift, like there are all these hit pieces on her for how much she uses her private jet and her impact on
Taylor Swift jet. If
Yeah.
you search that,
Yeah, if
you
you
got
search
all the
Taylor
hit
Swift
pieces.
jet on Google. All these pieces would come up, and
Because she owns 2 big baller planes,
Yeah.
and she flew. I mean,
I'm in
during
her
the
fan
tour,
club, so I
she's
follow her where she goes.
Yeah, she's flying 2 out of every 3 days.
So
during
these
the year.
articles were hit pieces on Taylor Swift talking about her CO2 emissions and her impact on the climate. And the conspiracy is that she has some genius PR agent that was like, "Hey, you're gonna go to a Jets game."
Yes.
And now anytime someone searches Taylor Swift jet,
It's
her
the
at
Jets
the,
game.
It's
yeah,
her
at
at
the
the
Chiefs and
Jets
Jets game
Brilliant.
comes up, and
That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
I was like, if that is
just
true,
push all the bad
I was like,
stuff
if
down.
that is true, kudos to the PR person because that's
That is
genius.
highest level chess playing.
Yeah.
that is actually
it's
quite
amazing, but
incredible.
TikTok's all about it.
Yeah, there's this whole movement on TikTok that like they just study Taylor Swift and like it's all conspiracy theories. I want to throw one more like private jet thing in here that I was just thinking about. Y'all probably aren't up to date on the Drake and Joe Budden beef, which is actually funny. I was telling Julie this story yesterday. So Joe Budden is an old rapper. And Julie thought I said Joe Biden. So when I told her this story, like she had
It didn't matter.
did not. She's like, why are Drake and Joe Biden beefing? But anyways, Joe Budden was talking shit about Drake's new album on his podcast, and Drake put up this whole Instagram post, and I'll have Jacob put it up. I won't read the whole thing, but the last line, he says, if you need to put it in simpler terms, I own a 767. Joe owns a modest house on the 973 and flies first class on special occasions.
Such.
That's like when you have a private jet and it's a 767, that is like a pretty baller thing to throw out there.
That's
But-
mic
drop.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn expensive.
No, man, his
Shit,
dude.
man.
I don't know if there's pictures of Drake's plane. I've just seen like the outside of it. I haven't seen the inside, but I imagine his 767 is built
You know,
out.
Travolta, I think, flies his 737.
Yeah, he's a
himself.
pilot.
Yeah,
he's a pilot.
he's
Yeah,
a
he
good
used to
actually
own a
flies it
707.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
All right,
Yeah.
I have a trivia for you guys.
What's that?
So this is our sort of energy transition moment, sponsored by
DW Insights.
DW
There you go.
Insights.
I hope it's a good question.
So-
I kind of went on that one blind.
So here's the
Hold
game.
on.
Here's the game. Name the commodity. No cheating. All right.
Corn.
And I'm going to have to, so some of the quotes from this article I was reading that's actually as of today. President of one of the largest producer of said commodity emphasized that merely raising prices won't suffice to meet the green transition's needs. They suggest that the transition timeline might need to be extended. So
Ooh.
this is interesting. Number 2. The price of this commodity has decreased 4% this year, standing at about $8,000 a ton. So the demand is anticipated to surge not only for the green economy, but also to support the economic growth of countries like India. Bullet point number 2. The challenge in producing the commodity, despite the anticipated growth, producers face difficulties in initiating large projects due to the decreasing availability of high-quality reserves. So some companies are actually resorting to innovative methods like extracting from old waste of said commodity. And finally, due to long development timelines, 10 to 15 years or more, coupled with low prices and political uncertainties, are making executives hesitant to invest in new projects. What does the commodity sound like if you didn't know any commodity?
Sure.
Sounds just like oil and gas, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But what commodity am I referring to?
Lithium.
No.
Copper.
Good call.
Copper.
Boom.
Copper.
Yeah.
Copper.
The giveaway was the declining ore quality.
Well, don't we hear that in unconventional all the time?
Yeah, but I was thinking mining, so
I said ore. I shouldn't have said ore.
You thought you were gonna stump Mark, dude?
Never.
No way.
So
I thought it was even
6'5",
something more
man. You can't
exotic
stump
than
me.
I think copper.
So
Is
the
he gonna keep
largest,
riding that stump joke?
so the largest,
it's all I got, man. It's all
the
I got.
largest copper producers are warning, saying, wait a minute. I know everyone wants to transition. We're providing copper is critical for the energy transition.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much copper is used. But they're saying we can't find enough. We can't produce enough. We don't have enough money to produce it, and it's lower quality. It's a big issue.
That's
something
what
we
they
need to
kinda
start tracking.
saying. Like,
and
do you think they may be artificially
No.
restricting?
No.
Nope.
I've heard that from multiple sources that
Yeah,
people out there that
they can't produce
the
enough.
electrification of America gets shut down for a whole lot of reasons.
Copper's number
wiring
one.
being one of the big ones.
Mm.
You know, the average Western requires 200 to 250 kilograms of copper, compared to the global average of 60 kilograms. Don't know what that means.
Oh, like,
over a
here's what-
lifetime, or
It's not important.
So
Right?
You don't need-
America
you don't-
needs to do
It's just a
is
good stat. I'm like, what does that mean?
send in meth heads from Oklahoma paragliding into China.
Yeah.
Their copper.
well,
Too
we
soon.
we have talked about
20
it.
a
I mean,
kilogram.
you got to do more stuff in terms of extraction and getting
it's
to
terrible.
purity. That just takes, in turn, a lot more energy to process, transport, and deliver.
Which again, I mean, and maybe we kind of close with is really freaking impressive. Everything you want to say bad about the industry, but the fact oil and gas still has oil and gas producing today, when we found all the easy stuff long time ago, it's been really hard to
Dude,
extract
absolutely.
stuff.
Actually, one
China.
thing that on your point, I always see people posting these charts when they're talking about mining, and the chart will show like how much oil and gas we extract compared to like how much, lithium and copper and these other metals. And like, we actually don't need that much. I'm like, yeah, but that's not a honest way to think about it. It's like the amount of earth that you have to move to get any amount of metal is
How big's the
significant.
hole?
Yeah.
It's gigantic.
500,000 pounds of stuff, including overburden, to ultimately dig up, transport, process to get to a 1,000-pound Tesla battery.
Yeah.
Right?
500,000 to 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something I don't think people realize is that ratio right there compared to oil and gas.
Well-
it doesn't take much at all in terms of
And it's not
footprint
like the
to-
Boy Scouts are doing it. It's not like a weekend service project.
Yeah.
It's slave labor. It's horrific. It's toxic.
Yeah,
So-
we've talked about all those
Yeah.
things, various, with Ford's
Yeah.
aluminum being sourced from Brazil and all that's going on with that bauxite refining and processing, to the nickel in Indonesia with that high pressure acid leaching, and then the Salton Sea stuff for lithium. So it's there's no solutions. There's only trade-offs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And scale in the the West and the U.S. in particular. Are we really willing to re-engage in that part of the supply chain,
Yeah.
in the value chain, and
So far, the answer's been no.
Yeah,
the answer's been no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started this show solemn. I mean, it was tough
Yeah.
news, but we're ending with some tough news, because I was in Dallas this weekend, and I don't know how many. I mean, look, here's the deal. I saw so many OU fans that had tuck fexes, and that drove me nuts. The down horns means we own you. If you down the horns, that means we own you, because we have the best.
Kind of look like they did own you, but go ahead.
But I don't love this. If you can if you're throwing a chain, and you're great at throwing chain, if you're a driller and you're throwing chain, if you are wearing a tuck fexes button, I don't care. I'm like, get back to work. I need you there. But if you're looking for a job where you're not really important, like anything in the office, like stuff I do, and you're wearing one of those shirts and I see it on social media, I'm not going to hire you. I'm not interviewing you. So OU played a great game. Their quarterback, Gabriel, impressed the shit out of me. Kudos to OU, but get rid of those damn buttons because I'm pissed. And then I learned last night about what happened? Strohs.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's pretty funny because
the roof was open. Let's just leave it
I
at
heard
that.
Kurt going on this rant. You had John in there. He's Arkansas. You're Aggie, right?
I am.
Yeah.
And if you can't capitalize on 14 penalties for 99 yards,
I thought for sure.
What are you
pull
doing?
that off.
Yeah.
Chuck's Rice.
yeah.
I'm
What did Rice
uncommitted.
do this weekend, Chuck?
Small private school trying
They
to
won a
compete
Nobel
with
Prize
someone,
or
someone that
And
Well,
the
what
best
I-
of
what
them
I'm
all,
laughing
the
about
School
is-
of Hard Knocks.
Yeah. What I'm laughing at is Kirk's been trying to like rile up, like trying to get support on his
None.
issue over here in the office, and everyone's like,
No one cares.
We just don't have any. We don't have any Longhorns in the office, man. You're the only
Sorry.
one.
But it's the university.
Yeah, whatever.
It's the university.
The ones that have that big fund.
yeah, the ones with the big
Half of it
endowment
well,
fund.
some goes to you guys too.
All right, guys. Good show. We'll keep tabs on what happens across the markets over the next week. We'll be back next Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday.
And just real quick, October 30th, 31st, 713 Music Hall, downtown Houston. We've got Fuse coming, our
Yeah.
South by Southwest of Energy Tech.
If you
Love
listen,
to see you there.
yeah, if you listen to BDE and you want to go to Fuse, hit me up. I will get you a discounted ticket for being a BDE listener. There's your Easter egg for it. So we'll catch y'all next week.